Right now, this is Ticker News Insight.
Hello and welcome back to Ticker News Insight, where we are looking to focus on the best of business with very clever people joining me from all around the world. I'm your host, Mike Loder, and to our latest story. And my next guest is witnessing a majority of supermarket shelves occupied by foreign-owned products and sees Australian-owned businesses now needing to take a stand, asking supermarkets to give them a fair go. Mark Kane is the Director of Sales and Marketing for Masel, a 40-year-old Australian and family-owned business, and Mark is here to shed light on the disadvantages Australian-owned businesses are now facing in our supermarkets, and of course what Aussies can do to show their support. It's good to see you, Mark. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
No worries at all. So I guess to start off, could you tell us a little bit about your group and that 40-year-old legacy that you've got and the work you guys are getting up to, just to start?
Yeah, sure. Masel's a family-owned company, 40 years old this year, very proudly making stocks and gravy products for the retail, food service and industrial sectors. And yeah, we're a part of this. We've actually sponsored an initiative by the Australian-owned certifying body to really bring to light a situation that's happening on supermarket shelves with shelf position relating to Australian-owned products.
Absolutely, because as we know, those positions on shelves is of course where everybody looks when they first walk into a retail store, and it's of course a lot more expensive to get certain parts of the shelves and such. But what disadvantages do you see Australian businesses facing in our supermarkets at the moment?
Specifically, I'd say shelf position and also distribution. So there are less than 15% of the products on Australian supermarket shelves are Australian owned these days. And what that means is big multinational companies are coming and taking the lion's share of market of the shelf space. And so quite often you'll find Australian companies with great products, but they'll be down on the bottom shelf or maybe up on the top shelf.
Absolutely. So what are the benefits, I suppose, of supporting Australian-owned businesses based on what you guys have witnessed in that 40 years? Why should we be jumping on board, backing our brands, I guess?
Well, there's not that many of us left, and the number one thing that I'd say is that with Australian-owned companies, you know that the profits stay in Australia, and that ultimately leads to prosperity for Australia, Australian businesses, etc. We want to be promoting anything that'll keep us alive and give us a better chance moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So I understand you guys did a bit of work with some famous cricketers there. We've got some vision on screen. Can you just make a comment on what this was all about?
Yeah, so this was the unfairest cricket match ever played, and this was Glenn McGrath came on board. The initiative was by Australian-owned certified. We sponsored the event, and it was because if you were to see the situation on Australian supermarket shelves, it's not a level playing field. So this was an exercise to point out that if it was happening on a sporting field, there'd be uproar. So we invited all of Australian-owned invited all of the politicians to come and go to bat for Australian-owned. And unfortunately, not a lot of politicians ended up showing up. So some regular Australians stepped into the fold and went to bat for Australia. But to highlight how unfair it is for Australian businesses, there were smaller stumps when Australia was bowling, and then enormous stumps when Australia was batting. They even gave the Aussies much smaller bats as well. And now there's actually a petition which is going on, which there's an opportunity to sign as well. So you can go to the Australian-owned website to see that, or masel.com. And it'll be there as well. There's a link to take you through to that, and sign that petition to ensure that there's a level playing field for Australian brands going forward.
And what a clever campaign as well. I think that's absolutely charming and just easy to understand. If it doesn't slap you in the face like that, how do you understand it now? So, but Mark, basically you've just outlined there how Australians can show their support. Who are you guys looking to get support from? Is it politicians, organisations, everyday people? Who are you looking to speak with?
Yeah, well, there's a bill going in front of the House of Representatives to actually bring in a bit of legislation that will ensure that there is a more level playing field on supermarket shelves for Australian-owned companies, and it supports them to try and ensure that looking into the future, 10 and 20 years, we don't get a situation where there's no Australian brands left. It's quite a complicated thing, but I think it's something that every Australian should get on board, because just like with that example with the cricket, if you see something that's unfair out there, you want to do something about it. So that's I guess a good way for the regular Australian to get out there and support Australian brands.
Absolutely. Mark, thank you so much for joining us on the program, bringing this to our attention, and of course it'll be one to keep an eye on in the years ahead, as we've seen a lot of Aussie brands becoming internationally owned, etc., etc. So I appreciate, again, bringing the awareness to us.
My pleasure, Mike.
All the best. And of course, thank you to all of you for tuning in. I hope you've learned something from my discussion there. I've been your host, Mike Loder, and be sure to head to tickernews.co for more. I'll see you again soon. Be well.